if you grew up in dysfunction, you were programmed at a very, very early age, do not ask for help. That is like the ultimate sin. It wasn't safe for me to ask for help. And a lot of times there was no supervising parent there for me to ask help from. So I was automatically left by myself to fend for myself. So I learned how to do that, and I got really good at it. A lot of people that grow up in dysfunctional families are extremely self-reliant. And as humans, as healthy human beings, self-reliance is not a bad thing. However, it can get out of balance.
You're listening to the Recovered Life Show, the show that helps people in recovery live their best recovered lives. And here is your host, Damon Frank.
And welcome back to the Recovered Life Show. I am thrilled to be joined today by Meredith Wickliffe. Meredith is a recovered life coach, and she deals specifically with dysfunctional family dynamics and codependency. How you doing, Meredith?
I am great, Damon. Thank you. I'm happy to be here.
I am so glad that you're on the show. I've been wanting to get you on. You have a very popular group meeting on Recovered Life, all about peeling back that dysfunctional family dynamic. And I want to do a show to talk with you just about that, about uncovering and, the process of healing the roots of dysfunctional family dynamics. And I know, you've been very outspoken about your past and about what happened with you and your family dynamics and how it got you to a place that you didn't want to be. And I was thinking maybe we just start off the podcast by just talking about your story, about what happened and, how you got into this.
Yeah, there's a lot to unpack with dysfunction, but I guess for me and my story began during childhood, of course, where a lot of people's stories do begin. I was raised in a dysfunctional home where there was addiction and alcoholism present. There was some mental health problems that were present. And, growing up in that, as a child, it's very normal. You don't realize, that's all you know. So you don't really realize that it's dysfunctional as you're living. For me and my story, I didn't learn about it until about 4 decades later when, growing up in that and learning all those defective ways to cope and being abused and neglected, how that played out on me emotionally as a child. And how I carried a lot of that emotional baggage with me. Didn't realize that I was, but I carried it with me. And it showed up in my relationships. It showed up in my professional work with perfectionism, with workaholism. It showed up in my marriage. It showed up in my family dynamics as an adult. It showed up just about everywhere. And, I call it my patterns were my pickers. So, I guess the biggest thing for me was learning what was normal and what wasn't, learning what worked for me and what didn't. And in my journey, that has been the toughest thing because no one taught me how to emotionally regulate. If you grow up in a dysfunctional family or a dysfunctional home, you basically are taught don't trust, don't feel. So you stay hidden, you wear a mask and you become what other people need you to be. So you never really get to know who you truly are at yourself, at your core, your authentic self. Your inner child gets very stunted. So
I love that. I love that. And, real quick, I want to jump in here with this. I think a lot of people might be listening to this that are in recovery from drugs and alcohol. Maybe they, are sober or they're thinking about getting sober. And I think that there is a big, there's a big fallacy in the whole thing with dysfunctional families and addiction. I think a lot of people believe that they look around, they go, well, I'm not an alcoholic. I'm not a drug addict. So obviously dysfunctional families, it didn't affect me. I had a dysfunctional family, but it didn't affect me. But that's not the case, right? It doesn't just impact people in the areas of physical production, addiction to drugs and alcohol.
that is absolutely correct. And I find that more and more and more as I dive into this work and do this work. The Symptoms, alcoholism and chemical dependency, I believe, are a mere symptoms of a deeper rooted issue. And most of the time, the deeper rooted issue is codependency and being raised in some form of dysfunctional, having been traumatized as a child somewhere, being raised with a parent or caregiver who had mental health problems. Um, the the behaviors themselves, I've never personally had a chemical dependency problem, but I can tell you firsthand, and being raised and completely surrounded by people with chemical dependency problems and addictions, I think just like them. My thought patterns are exactly the same. I mean, obsession, people pleasing. I mean, I could go. There's such a plethora of baggage and of symptoms that come out with codependency. People just don't realize it. And the other thing that I've noticed in my experience and being in this, being in recovery for 14 years, is that I've met a lot of codependents that do not suffer with alcohol or drug chemical dependency problems. They don't have any, but they have other ones. But I have never met an alcoholic or a chemically dependent person that did not suffer from some form of codependency. And that's the thing.
Absolutely.
That is the most deeply rooted issue. In most of the recovery that I've come across. People just don't know.
Yeah. And I think Meredith too, a lot of times, some of the signs that I have seen, and everybody is different, obviously, but if you have a lot of siblings that have addiction issues and you don't, right? Like, and
Mhm.
I've identified that there's some dysfunction, or you're collecting a lot of dysfunctional people in your life,
Right.
that also could be a sign that, growing up in a dysfunctional family dynamic has hurt you, right? Because those
Absolutely.
are outward signs. And I think I even call codependency an addiction because we have an addiction to the outcome of what people are going to do for us, right? So it's the
Absolutely.
exact same thing.
Yes.
How do people look at their life? What are some other signs that people might look around and they know that, hey, their childhood wasn't perfect? No one's childhood's perfect, right? We're going to say this up front. And a lot of people are doing the best that they can raising children. And now, obviously, Meredith, times have changed. We're talking about this now. We weren't really talking about this as much 20 to 30 years ago, 40 years ago. But what are some of the signs that people would see that, like, wow, you know what? Growing up in a dysfunctional family has really, it's hurting my life.
Yeah, there are some. One of the biggest ones in my experience has been the development of perfectionism, and holding yourself to such a high regard, high standards you could never meet. Perfectionism is an illusion. It's never attainable. um, Naturally, abuse or neglect. Some people don't know that they've been abused or neglected. There are all forms of abuse. It's not just physical abuse. There's mental and emotional abuse. So there's one. A lot of unpredictability in the home and fear where there's no stability, there's no emotional regulation. There's a lot of abandonment, either physical, mental, or emotional abandonment. Where Another sign is growing up and having your caregiver's love be conditional, where you have to perform in order to feel love. One of the biggest ones is lack of boundaries. If you don't know what boundaries are, people confuse boundaries for walls. And if you've done any research or done any, diving into any type of boundaries really keep you safe. And they're definitely not a luxury. They're a necessity if you want to live happy and healthy. Poor communication and lack of intimacy are also one of the biggest ones for me is lack of trust, where you're always waiting for the other shoe to drop. You're always, planning worst case scenario, that hyper vigilance of, oh, if they do X, I'm going to do this. So you have 10 scenarios played out, and then the 11th scenario is the one you didn't think of. And that's the one that happens. So there's a lot of different signs. There is a lot. And those are just a few.
Yeah, Meredith, it's interesting because I remember getting sober and then going through the process of getting sober and, working and rebuilding my life. And I was fortunate to get sober early in my life. Um, but I would be able to take jobs like assistance to people who were very crazy and all over the place, right? And I'd be able to really be able to kind of take that abuse
Mhm.
And I remember kind of seeing the difference between me and other people being able to take it, but I'd also get a rolled in it. It's like I think the problem is when you're growing up in these situations and and it could just be a family member, right? That imparted it. The rest of the situation could be great. But what happens is that people that grow up in dysfunctional families, especially if there's drugs and alcohol in it, in addition, or an underlying mental illness, they feel comfortable in chaos. We can operate well there because we're used to it where other people can't. But eventually, I find that starts to erode your life, right? Like you can't live that level of instability forever without it having direct effect on you as a person and the life choices that you have.
That is absolutely correct. And it doesn't just affect your body. I mean, it affects all parts of your body. It affects your mental health, your emotional health, of course. But I think a big piece that I know I missed personally was the toll it took on my physical health. The from the symptoms that we talked about, perfectionism and workaholism, it was nothing for me to work a 120-hour work week. I could work 20 hours a day and function on very little food and very little sleep and think that was healthy. And I did that for decades. But it took a toll on my body years later. So you're 100% right. No person, no human being can sustain that level of function. It will catch up. I know it did for me, and it does for most people. It's just a matter of when. It's just a matter of how connected you are. Growing up in dysfunction, you become what I call and what I've heard call, you live in a disassociative state. So you're really disconnected from yourself and who you are. You're disconnected from your soul identity, and you live your life externally. You live it for other people. You live it to please and to, because you never feel good enough. You always feel like you have to perform and you have to do, and you get your worth and your purpose by doing. And we do that, or I did that in my external world. So I never fully could connect on the inside. And then I wondered why I felt like crap. It's like, this is not working, because it shows up in every area of your life. It shows up in your
Yeah.
relationships. It shows up in your professional work. It shows up with colleagues. It shows up, in your body. I mean, you cannot, there's a saying that I like to remind myself of, is you can't outrun your demons. They will catch you. So it's
That's
just,
absolutely right.
yeah, it's
That's
just a
absolutely right.
matter of when you can deal with them.
Meredith, I think the thing is that's shocking about this for people that look at it is that they might not uncover that actually the unhappiness in their life, the root is a dysfunctional family dynamic until much later. Like, I'm somebody who was raised, one of my parents was an alcoholic. I was raised in that dysfunction and there was some craziness there. I had other members of my family that weren't like that at all. It was very healthy, right? But that one thing, even after becoming an alcoholic myself, which I said I would never do, right? Going through all of that crap to be able to get sober and to rebuild my life and to do it, I didn't really stumble upon that this was really an issue as big until my 30s, right? Like it was still like a decade later or so. And I'm still unraveling some of the patterns that I have in my life that are really triggered by that past dysfunctional family dynamic. And I think the overworking thing, you just totally nailed it. Both of us are entrepreneurs and are
Mhm.
out doing it. And it's like being able to constantly over deliver and always having to have the answer. For me, like when I started to question that, why am I over delivering all the time? Why do I always have to have the answer to that? I don't have to have the answer. I don't know. Like, that was a huge uncovering. And it was shocking to me that it took that long, even being in recovery around great people, right? Like you, to really uncover that. But it's not, I guess what I'm going to ask you is it's not rare, right? For people in their 40s, 50s, 60s, and even 70s to start to wake up and say, oh my gosh, maybe some of the ways that I live my life and the decision I make come from the root of that dysfunctional family.
Oh, it's not uncommon at all. I mean, you're looking at one. I'm 56 years old, and I didn't find recovery until I was in my 40s. And even the first, maybe 5 or 10 years of that, I spent in Al-Anon, which is a 12-step program for people recovering from the effects of someone else's addiction. It wasn't until about the last four plus years, I guess, that I was able to find Adult Children of Alcoholics, which really focuses on the family dynamic. And that is where that was the root of my core issue. And I can tie everything back to not blaming my childhood, of course, because that's not what ACA is about. The ACOA 12-step program is about finding your truth, and you have to go backwards so you can move forward. And because I was stuck, and I know I was stuck in trauma. And when you are traumatized, your emotional growth gets stunted at the age of which that trauma occurred. So my trauma occurred at between 6 and 7 years old. So here I am walking around in my 30s and 40s as an adult, but I'm showing up in my relationships like a 7-year-old. So you can imagine that didn't go over very well, because I was traumatized. I wasn't taught how to, process trauma. I wasn't taught how to process and regulate emotions. I wasn't even allowed to have emotions growing up unless it was anger. So, I had to do a lot of anger management things. That's how anger was one of the things that I used to cope and be able to get done what I needed to get done. And it really turned me inside out. It turned me, my codependency turned me into a person that I authentically am not supposed to be. And the one thing I really want to focus on, being a recovered life coach, there's no better time to be in recovery or have an addiction issue. There is so much help out there. There's so much more help than what there used to be. However,
Absolutely.
for codependence, there is not a lot. I mean, there's a lot of help in general, but like, for instance, I'll describe what I'm talking about. If you have a chemical dependency issue, you can walk into a treatment center and check yourself in for 30, 60, 90, 180, however long you feel you need, and you can get the help that you need. There are not treatment programs like that I'm aware of. At least they're not in my area for codependency. There are meetings, there are 12-step meetings, there's therapy, there's behavior modifications, there's things like Recovered Life, but there's no real treatment because it's not recognized in the psychological community or in the DSM-5, which is, what that is. It's the medical diagnostic tool. It's not listed as an actual disease. And I have great issue with that, because codependency to me is just as much of an addiction issue as a chemical dependent one.
Absolutely. You know what? And it is a killer. It really drains your life. And and you're not outliving your best life if you are inwoven in this, right?
No, you're
So
not.
Meredith, what I want to do is when we come back from this quick break, everybody who's listening to this and they're like, yep, Meredith, check, check, check. This is me. This is me. This is me. We're going to talk about, after this quick break, how you can really start to uncover this and start the healing process. We're on with Meredith Wickliffe. We're going to be back after this quick break. Are you ready to fully participate in your life and achieve true mastery? Join Kristen Fuller every Tuesday at 3 p.m. for the Life Mastery Hour, a peer support room designed to help you succeed in life and recovery. During this 1-hour peer support group, Kristen will discuss a variety of topics to help you navigate the challenges of early sobriety and build the skills you need to live a sober and fulfilling life. From overcoming trauma and dealing with obstacles to finding purpose and building resilience, Kristen has the knowledge and experience to guide you on your journey to a more fulfilling, recovered life. Don't be held back any longer. Join the Life Mastery Hour and start your path to a better tomorrow. RSVP now by going to recoveredlife.us and click on Find My Group. And we'll see you Tuesday at 3 p.m.
You're listening to The Recovered Life Show, the show that helps people in recovery live their best recovered lives.
And we're back, and I'm talking with Meredith Wickliffe. We're talking about uncovering and healing the roots of dysfunctional family dynamics. That's a mouthful.
It
Really, I
is.
think I should have just said, your life's a mess. What the heck's going on? Meredith is here. She's going to drop some value bombs with us right now about, if this is you, if you were listening to the first segment of this and you're like, yep, this is me. Yep, I'm over delivering all the time. I'm not happy. I don't have great relationship. You're going down the list and everything you're identifying with Meredith said. Where do you start, Meredith? You're a great recovered life coach. You deal with this specifically. Where does somebody start if they've identified this might be me?
Well, I can speak from my own experience. And for me, I had to recognize the first thing I had to do is I had to recognize how much pain I was in. And it wasn't until I could really get in touch with myself as an individual and get honest with myself is this how I wanted to feel. So I had to really ask myself the hard question, So from that point on, once I realized, yes, I am in pain, and pain was my motivator to get help. You have to start unpacking and addressing some very uncomfortable things about yourself and about your life. Um, the other thing is, I don't believe, I know I could not recover alone. So asking for help, reaching out, doing research, whatever research you can, going out into community, Googling like a Clubhouse. There's so many resources out there. But being able to start building a community and a tribe of people that are similar to you. We are all different people. We come from all walks of life, but we all are very, very similar. The next thing is, once you can identify that you need some help, that's the first step. Awareness is the first step. After that, you have to start doing the help that you seek. You have to start doing those things and putting them into action. So for me, I had to really take an inventory of myself and where I was. I had to clean my slate. So that was very, very difficult. And I could not do that alone. I asked for help from a therapist. I got into a 12-step meeting. There's many ways to recover, I believe, and it's a very individual process. But for me, I have found that 12-step recovery has been my lifeline. The biggest part, I think, too, now is once you start to get into it, it's very isolating. It can be very lonely. You feel like you're the only one in the world that's going through this. My best suggestion is to get your tribe, find your people, because the people that are currently in your life are probably very similar to you. And you're going to start seeing, as you start to recover, if they're not recovering, you're going to start seeing some differences. So you need to surround yourself with people who have tools that are on a similar path. It is extremely helpful.
Absolutely. You know what, Meredith, I want to go back to that a little bit. You were talking about this connection. Now, one of the things that I've noticed about codependency is if you're raised in a dysfunctional family, a lot of times what happens is the idea of asking for help is the worst sin that you could do. Like you have to figure it out, right? So a lot of
Oh,
the times,
absolutely.
if you're a child in this situation, it's like you learn very on, don't ask for help. Figure it out yourself, because asking for help is going to put me in a vulnerable situation. And I don't want to be the person who doesn't have the answer. Right.
That is
So
correct.
I think, alcoholics, one of the biggest things when they come into recovery is they have to realize that it's an illusion, that it's really alcohol that is part of the problem, right? We don't think that alcohol is part of the problem. We think it's everything else. And I think with codependency, I think it's the thing. It's like, I don't need other people. I'm going to figure it out by myself. Is that version of it for codependent? I don't need to connect with people. I don't need it, right? Like, it's so hard. But I think you would say taking that first step is really the key to healing, right? You're not going to be able to do it alone and by yourself.
That's absolutely right. And that is what I believe has been one of the biggest successes for my recovery, has been those 12-step meetings, those in-person meetings, those Zoom meetings, that community and that tribe. You are absolutely right. If you grew up in dysfunction, you were programmed at a very, very early age, do not ask for help. That is like the ultimate sin. It wasn't safe for me to ask for help. And a lot of times there was no supervising parent there for me to ask help from. So I was automatically left by myself to fend, to fend for myself. So I learned how to do that, and I got really good at it. A lot of people that grow up in dysfunctional families are extremely self-reliant. And as humans, as healthy human beings, self-reliance is not a bad thing. However, it can get out of balance, and we can, like, I lived in a bubble, and I craved connection because I'm a human being. And when I didn't get that connection, then I'd get upset, or I'd get angry, or, whatever emotion would come up. And then I would further spiral down. I call that a codependent spiral. The opposite of addiction is connection. Addiction loves the darkness, and the connection brings light to that darkness. And that's how I play it in my mind, is having
You,
that community to remind you and be that light for you. When you cannot be the light for yourself, they can be that light for you until you can be
absolutely.
yourself.
It's essential. It's really essential
It
to
is.
being able to live your best recovered life and to be able to heal from this, which is really what it's about. I have to ask this question because I know anyone who's listening to this right now that's thinking about this journey, one of their biggest fear is, does this mean I have to cut out everybody in my life? Does this mean that I can't talk to my mom or my dad or my brother or my sister, my best friends growing up? Like, what does this mean for me? Does this mean that it's over for all those people and I have to start anew? What's your answer to that? Because I know that's a huge fear.
It is. And
People
and
with
my
codependency, that's the last thing they want to do.
Oh, absolutely. My answer to that is no. You do not have to do anything that you become a recovery gives you the benefit of choice. It gives you tools to be able to still work within a dysfunctional family if you choose to stay within a dysfunctional family. It only takes one person within that family to change a generational cycle of dysfunction. So if you want to have your family, your family of origin in your life, you absolutely can do that. The recovery by no means says that you have to just throw the baby out with the bathwater and kick everybody to the curb and start over. um, that is a choice that you get to make once you start to reconnect with yourself and figure out what's going to work best for you. In my situation, there are some family members that I did have to let go of. I had to detach with love, and I love them, but they're not a part of my life. And then there's other ones that are. I also have, non-recovering people in my life. I love them. They're not recovering. They don't live the same lifestyle, but they're still a part of my life, and I still have relationships with them. But I know who they are. I know who I am, and I have good boundaries. I know how to practice good boundaries. I have a coach too that helps me. I practice a program of recovery. And I know for me, as long as I do that, I can have anybody in my life that I choose to.
Absolutely. Absolutely. You know what, Meredith? In conclusion here, I really love for you to talk to anybody who's listening to this that is very fearful about doing this. They know something's wrong, right? But
Yes.
maybe deep down inside, they're like, you know what? I've maybe tried to have different people. I've tried to set boundaries. I've tried to break out of that role that my family and friends put me in. I just can't seem to get there. Maybe it's just not possible for me. Uh, what's your message to somebody who's listening to this that's just fearful and thinks it's just not going to work for me, this healing process?
I think that was the number one thing that held me back was fear. Before I got into recovery, I was married to an alcoholic, and a seed of recovery that I needed was planted 17 years prior to me getting there. So if someone is out there and listening to this, use this as a seed. You show up when you get there. You get it when you're ready for it. When the student is ready, the teacher appears. I know I had to be able to walk through my fear to be able to live a different life. I no longer chose or wanted to choose to live life in suffering and in pain. I wanted to live a happy, joyful life. And that doesn't mean that there's no fear that's there. It just means that I can wrap it up differently. I can feel the fear, but I can do it anyway, knowing that I'm going to get a different result. And
Hmm.
if you are tired of living in dysfunction, you're tired of living in pain, tired of suffering, tired of, just being taken advantage of, whatever the case may be. I have a very small little low or a slogan that I use, and I use it all the time, and it's do it different. If we always do what we've always done, we will always get what we've always gotten. So take a chance. You are the best investment you will ever make in yourself.
Oh, I agree. You are the best investment. So if you're listening to this, get some help. A good start is a meeting that we've got on Recovered Life that you host that is amazing. It's called Healing Within Dysfunctional Families. Meredith, talk about that. It's at 11 a.m. I'm sorry, 5 p.m. Every Wednesday, Pacific time. It is an amazing meeting. What can people expect if they go to that meeting?
They can expect love and support, a listening ear. They can expect to find like topics with open discussion, a safe environment and safe place where other people are going through the same things or maybe have been on the same journey. A lot of good suggestions and solutions. We do not give people advice. We don't force. We basically share our experience, strength, and hope and let other people know what's worked for us, and that we give other people hope that they can do it too. And that meeting is every Wednesday at 8 p.m. Eastern time. It's a wonderful meeting. And I'm
Absolutely, it is.
so grateful to be a part of Recovered Life. I can't thank you enough, Damon.
Well, we're thrilled to have you because I think you are addressing something, and there's been a big popularity for this meeting. So definitely, if this is something that you want to do, we're going to put a link to the show notes about how to get a hold of Meredith, how to attend that meeting, Healing Within Dysfunctional Families. I think the reason, Meredith, that so many people are attracted to that meeting and working with you and finding out is that they're starting to uncover, that awareness is starting to come up, that there is something more there, that there's no coincidence that they married an alcoholic. There's no coincidence that they have a substance, right? Like this maybe isn't a coincidence, that maybe there's something there, and they're starting to unravel that and uncover that. And this is a really great, safe place to do it. So definitely check her out Wednesdays, 8 p.m. Eastern, 5 p.m. Pacific, Healing Within Dysfunctional Families. Meredith, thanks so much for coming on the Recovered Life show today and sharing your wisdom with everybody.
Thank you so much, Damon. It's been a pleasure to be here.
Talk to you soon.
Thank you.
Keep the conversation going. Join Recovered Life. Recovered Life is a peer support network with direct access to top recovery coaches, content, community, and quality peer support meetings that can be accessed virtually. Whether you're pursuing a 12-step program, not involved in 12 steps, spiritual, agnostic, atheist, or just trying to figure it out, you're welcome here. Sign up today and access unlimited group meetings for only $19.99 a month. And because we know you'll love it, we're offering you your first 30 days for free. Don't wait. Visit recoveredlife.us and become a member today.